Seaweed and Carrageenan industry in the Philippines. The seaweed industry in the Philippines started in 1965 or early 1966 with the trial farming of Kapaphycos variety. In 1970 to 1971, Max Doughty and Victor Alvarez introduced that the tropical eucheuma species can be grown, which became the basis for the Philippines to have its commercial cultivation. The scientific name Kapaphycos alvarezi or cotonai has taken its name from Victor Alvarez, a Filipino marine scientist. In 1977 to 1996, PES or the Philippine Eucheuma Seaweed SRC and RC factories were established. However, the Seaweed Industry Association of the Philippines was organized in 1985 to protect the stakeholders. In 1990 to 1994, the PES or SRC was bombarded with attacks, petitions, and complaints by RC manufacturers from the USA and the European Union countries because they were threatened that the PES or SRC will eat up their markets, considering that SRC is much cheaper than RC. Benson Dakay, the owner of Schamberg Corporation, assembled some scientists and personalities like Dr. Harris Bixler, Scott Rangos, Kevin Jandro, and the others to counter the attacks and penetrate the SRC markets in the USA. They were successful then, and in 1995, JECFA approved SRC as food additive with the number E407A. RC was given the number E407. From then on, PES became SRC. China, Indonesia, Malaysia, and other countries put up their own factories, and even those who opposed the SRC rode with the tide and put up their SRC factories in the Philippines. The issues on SRC continued because in 2001 until 2008, again, demolition jobs surfaced, headed by Joan Tobacman, the Cornucopia Institute, the Food Babe, in which they lobbied that Carrageenan will be delisted from the National Organic Standards Board or NOSB. But the US FDA ruled out against them. It is expected that the attacks against Carrageenan is a never-ending story. The seaweed industry in the Philippines is dominated by Kapaphycos and eucheuma and is composed of three major stakeholders. Basically, seaweed farming in the Philippines is a family type of aquaculture activity composed of 170 to 180,000 families, even reaching to as high as 200,000 families involved. 20 to 30 regular traders and exporters, and there are 15 processors, 12 for SRC and 3 for RC. The SRC processors have also the capacity to produce alkali-treated chips, or we call the ATC. Seaweed production in the Philippines had its ups and downs. From 2016 to 2019, the growth was only about 7%, which was not even half of the targeted 10 to 15% annual growth. Production even reduced in 2020 compared to 2019. Major reasons of the fall in productivity was the very bad weather. There were lots of typhoons due to climate change. Second reason is the lack of high-yielding good seedlings and pupagules. And the COVID pandemic last year was another. The seaweed industry is still targeting 10% to 15% annual growth in seaweed production, particularly the eucheuma species. Major seaweed producing areas in the Philippines are those in the southern parts, in the islands of Mindanao, which contribute 60 to 65% of the total production in the country. The islands of Tawi-Tawi, Jolo, Maguindanao, Zamboanga, and Lanao areas where most of the seaweed are grown, and these are areas in which our Muslim brothers live, in which their livelihood are fishing and seaweed farming. However, the best quality seaweed are still produced in Palawan, the western part of the country. Historical average prices of road-dried seaweed or RDS, Capaphycos and alvarezi or cotonai. The years prior to the Beijing Olympics in 2008, RDS eucheumatoid seaweed prices would range between 600 to 900 US dollars per metric ton. But in 2008, the price doubled, reaching $2,000 per metric ton due to the very high demand of Karaginan in China. From then on, in 2009, up to last year, the RDS prices did not go back to the heyday years and were between $1,200 to $1,800 per metric ton. Isn't that lucrative for the seaweed farmers? The Eucheuma spinosum seaweed, the prices also spiked in 2014 due to the sudden surge of Iota Karaginan demand in the world market. This was also the time that Eucheuma spinosum seaweed production in the Philippines and Indonesia dwindled because the farmers got discouraged of the very low prices in the years 2007 to 2013. Currently, the seaweed prices now is in abundance. The seaweed species, is in abundance, and the prices are more stable compared to the Eucheuma cotonai. There are 3 SRC processors, 2 KCl precipitated and 1 alcohol precipitated factories, 12 SRC factories which can also produce ATC. Total nominal capacity combined is 35,000 metric tons per year, 6,000 of which are for RC and 29,000 for SRC. ATC has a combined capacity of 3,400 metric tons per year. So the total RDS requirement is about 196,000 metric tons per year, which translates to about 1.6 million of fresh Eucheuma seaweed. Karaginan from the Philippines are distributed all over the world, with the USA as the major market of about 35% to 40%, followed by the European countries like Spain, France, Denmark, Germany, 30 to 32%, China and Australasia at 25 to 28%, South America at 20% to 23%, and the Middle East at 5 to 10%. The global market of Karaginan is forecasted to grow 3 to 5% annually. Now, the food ingredients market is a multi-billion-dollar industry in which the food hydrocolloid such as Karaginan is 20% of the $35 billion industry. This is the hope of the seaweed and Karaginan industry in the Philippines and even in Indonesia. The food hydrocolloids comprises starch, gelatin, Karaginan, pectin, xanthan, gum arabic, and others. The driving forces of this business is the growing world population and the growth of some emerging economies globally. The global market of Karaginan is forecasted to grow, as what I've said, 3% to 5% annually. Karaginan being a food hydrocolloid which cannot be replicated nor replaced due to its versatility in function, is 20% or about $1.5 billion industry. This is the reason why China is wanting to dominate this industry in the global arena. Unfortunately, China is very dependent on the Philippines and Indonesia for their raw seaweed supply. With a positive outlook of Carrageenan industry, there are also stumbling blocks or the major challenges that our industry is facing. Some process machineries are old and antique, vintage, which are not efficient enough in the Carrageenan production compared to what China has. We lack the research and innovation in the applications of seaweed and seaweed products, and also the applications for Carrageenan. Because some scientists had retired and there is no succession on the line who has the same caliber as the experts. Brain drain in the country. Health and safety issues of Carrageenan are also still in the horizons waiting for its emergence again. The seaweed industry of the Philippines is faced with challenges just like any other industry. Number 1, low productivity and production due to poor farming practices like continued vegetative propagation, poor site selection, use of slow-growing strains, intensive farming, and post-harvest practices. Number 2, insufficient financial and technical support from the government and academia. There is shortage of capital for expansion, lack of crop insurance, we have a weak industry-academia linkages. Number 3, there are diseases and pests infestation due to lack of vigor of the cultured seaweed, brought by the adverse effects of climate change and due to repetitive vegetative propagation. Next is poor biosecurity measures and farm management. There is lack of specific policies for seaweed and pertinent to introduction of a species within the town, province, region, and most importantly, countries outside the Philippines. Well, the Philippine seaweed industry somehow fulfills nearly all the 17 goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to transform the lives of mankind from the smallest unit of institution called the family up to the whole world. Despite 5 decades of seaweed commercial farming in the Philippines, with many challenges we have, we keep on moving forward with passion in our hearts. Since seaweed aquaculture is the top producing commodity of the aquaculture sector of the Philippines, we have to be proactive and responsive to the needs of every stakeholder. As we are working at present the new seaweed roadmap of the country, our hands are full of what to do, focusing mainly on the major concerns on production like 1. Upscaling the mass production of new and improved seedlings. Number 2, strengthening the linkages among the stakeholders. Number 3, diversification of seaweed and seaweed products like the introduction of multi-species cropping or IMTA, the integrated multi-trophic aquaculture of finfish, mollusk, crustacean, and seaweed. Other products, not only Carrageenan, but also products for cosmetics, pharmaceutical, nutraceuticals, and biorefinery industries. While there has been a lot of things said about seaweed and the Carrageenan industry, there must also be so much to be done for a brighter future in this industry to alleviate the millions of lives of the marginalized fisher folks who are dependent in seaweed farming for their living. We hope all of us we can pitch in. Thank you, and may God bless the seaweed industry in our country. Again, thank you for your attention.